All right, cool. So we're rolling. So let me start off. Dude, I really appreciate the care package you sent a couple, maybe a week or so ago. It was really sweet.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It inspired me to put another one together, and I just sent another package out last week. But
Mm-hmm.
it's always fun putting those together, and just takes me back to kind of the feeling of getting like a card in the mail from grandma or something unexpected. And I'm glad you liked it. Uh, I had fun putting it together. So
Yeah, yeah. I seen that you're sending out another one, so I'm excited that maybe this is who knows how long, but that it rekindled it and for you to do it.
absolutely, it's fun. And it's a good way to, I think, kind of connecting to the book, or the idea of like a digital off ramp, right?
Mm,
Um, like in the recent package I sent, I had two books, and one of them is a book that it's a bird watching book, right? And so this
okay.
gentleman lives in nature, and I think that's like one way to get off the digital off ramp is you can take a book and learn a lot about nature and things around you. So um, I was keeping in tone with the book and everything. There is I think a real need to kind of get people on the digital off ramp, so to speak.
Mm, yeah, I dig it. I like that idea too, where you're having like this online interaction with someone and then you physically send them a package. I mean, I'm just kind of saying it out loud, but you physically send them a package. And then in that there's like a prompt. There's like, hey, maybe you should consider going outside and checking out these birds. So it's like, tying the physical and the digital together. I think that's pretty cool. It makes me think of like alternate reality games and how uh, you can start to tie certain ideas into a larger reality. Yeah.
Certainly, and one aspect too was like getting into nature was like I put, what are they called, buckeyes, right? So things to plant too, and to watch something grow, to check up on, and to keep
Yeah.
a routine to it. But what were you? Can you extrapolate a little bit more into what were you saying with the alternative reality?
Yeah, the little bit that I know is the first one that comes to mind, I think, is something that they did for either Pacific Rim or The Dark Knight a couple years ago, where they create a website. It's like you create intrigue and ways of interacting in this physical reality, but it's also through like digital media and fictional media
Hmm.
that you might be like it might be the Joker. It has a bunch of little, or the Riddler in that whole universe might have a bunch of different packages, geocache packages
Oh.
around different states, and then the people they physically go to those places based off of clues that are led in like commercials, and then they actually go to those geocache sites. They open up the geocache, and then there's another layer to then, okay, now based on you, the people who have found this, you go deeper into it. It takes you to a website. It's like a not convoluted, but it's a very expansive, and it's all bringing you back into, for this case, like the Dark Knight and promoting the Dark Knight, but it can be used for a bunch of different things.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool. It makes me think as well. Like I have a lot of thoughts off of that, but that kind of marketing where you create
Mm,
something where people go out into the world and they geocache or whatever, they in turn that into content or another advertisement. Right, like here's me
yeah.
going to find insert movie name, and it just turns into like getting people to kind of work for you without even them maybe not even understanding it, or promote you.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. What are your thoughts?
I like that. Anything that's sort of interactive and taking me from this passive position that a lot of the content and media I consume.
Hmm.
I think I'm on board with that, and I think it's not used often enough. So for now, I'm like totally all about it. Like, yeah, why not? I could see it being used in like sneaky and maybe harmful ways, but for like now, I'm like, yeah, we need more people playing. It goes back to like what I was thinking. We need more people playing games and having these interactions that are playful.
Yes, playful games. It's interesting when you think, well, like when I was young, I went to a daycare, and even like in that there was a lot of games that we played, like Red Rover, tag, hide and
Mm,
seek, and I wonder now, like, is that still occurring? Like, is Red Rover, is tag, like, is it's? I wonder what the ratio rates would be for kids playing these like childhood games collectively, even
mhm.
outside. I bet it's declined in isolation, and video game play has increased in that area.
Yeah, my daughter and I will go to the playground in the morning, and there's like, what is it? Hopscotch. There's a
Hmm.
hopscotch outline in one of the ball courts, and um, I mean, I don't see a lot of kids now that it's getting warmer. I'm actually starting to see more kids out. And the other night, actually, we were at the playground, and it was like getting dusk, and there were lots of kids out there. But the little bit that I saw, well, my daughter, she just ended up digging a hole in the ground with a stick, so that was, like, very basic stuff, like but, your kids are a little bit older, so do you see, uh, maybe what's your experience with that whole older age group?
Um, well, like I went. It's funny enough. I went to a park today as well. And the park I went to was an indoor park, but it was pretty empty, sparsely populated.
Mm,
And I wondered why that was. Like, are more people going to the parks outside now because the weather was better? And I was expecting this park to, because it has an inside outside kind of aspect to it, but the outside portion of the park's still closed, which disappointed me. But
mm,
when I do go to the parks, one thing I notice is the imaginative play, right, of the children that are typically playing is related to some type of propaganda, like Spider-Man, or they're
oh,
superheroes, or which, I mean, maybe it's the same thing as cowboys and Indians, or good guys, bad guys, cops, robbers. And
yeah,
I understand that aspect of it, but I see a lot of replaying of things that they have seen on screen, and it's interesting. But any kid at the park, I'm just glad they're running around and playing, like the active and even the social interactions. One thing I do notice at the parks too is like parents, and I understand it, like, helicopter parenting or lawnmower parenting. There's all kinds of different phrases, but um, the on some level, I feel like if you take your kid to a park, you should never take your eyes off them, right? Like, period.
sure, sure.
Like, you should be watching the other kids. You should be seeing like the hierarchy in the park, who's gonna
Yep, yep,
misbehave, like everything. But when I go to parks now, I see, okay, there are parents who do uh, maintain a good perimeter and are being responsible and paying attention. But I see a lot of parents just sit on a bench and stare at the phone the whole time. And I
yeah,
like, I don't, to me, I think they're missing out on something. I don't know what it would be, but maybe they're doing something important as well. I'm not sure, but that's kind of
mm,
an
mm,
aspect I think is maybe missing from the community play, like the actual engagement, like I'm being watched, or like I'm being encouraged to play. Because even if you're just on the perimeter, you're still, and you're watching and you're observing, you're
mhm,
still engaged, I think, in the child's mind and what they're doing. You don't have to be talking to them. You don't have to be playing with them. They just want to know that kind of you're looking at them and you're watching with admiration or support. Um, but I don't see that as much as I'd like to, I would say.
yeah. Yeah, it's a shame 'cause even if there's no like words spoken, but the parent is witnessing the child play, I think even afterwards, I do this just because I have the performance background, but I'm always like replaying, and I'm sure plenty of people do this as well, but I'll replay interactions or things that I've done. So I think, like, if the parent afterwards on the walk home could replay certain things and kind of
Mm,
talk through experiences, that even that is helpful. It's like, yeah.
certainly. And yeah, I'm a big fan of that debriefing, asking
Mm,
questions,
mm,
stimulating the thought process. There's a lot to get out, right? And I have a belief that you really don't know anything unless you talk to your kids or talk to people and you get information out of them. Like, just thinking something someone's thinking is a pretty big assumption, or what they're capable of, or what their thoughts might be, what their emotions were. But yeah, there's so much to take away from just watching and then having a conversation later.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's amazing.
It may the last part on this whole thing, which is great. I wonder sometimes I'll play this game like then if we are in the playground as the parents observing the kids play, I imagine that this is what God does. God is watching us in the
Hmm.
playground, and so I like to play that in my head where it's like I'm just one step removed from it, but it goes further, and that's kind of
Mm,
interesting to kind of you know make sense of the reality sometimes.
absolutely. And it reminds me of the word kindergarten, right? Which is a German word, and
Mm,
it's a garden of kids, right? And so you think about that just in a concept, like that is kind of what you should be seeing when you see like kids collectively playing, and it should look like a garden of joy, a garden of fun. And it is, there's a lot to just enjoy in watching it and appreciating that it's there.
yeah, big time, big time. Um, So I wanted to go over, let me pull it to the chapter 2. I appreciate you looking over. First of all, I appreciate you sending the book, and then I appreciate you looking over chapter 2 and being interested in like talking about the ideas that um, were presented.
Absolutely. It
Do
was
you
really
do you want to? Yeah,
stimulating.
go ahead. Sorry.
I
Mm,
was really stimulating book. And sometimes I have to read it because this book was translated, right? Um,
I
I
think
think
so. Yeah.
so. Some of the uh, I wonder like how much of the voice is. I bet it's a good voice that transmits through it, but like I tried to read the chapters and or the chapter in just an accepting way, right, without like
Mm, mm,
taking what I think. And then I read it again, and then the second time I try to read it from that perspective, like maybe do I agree or disagree, or like or do I have a little bit more of a critical thought the second time I read it? But overall, I was in fairly like I was in agreement with most of what was written, and I even liked how it ended with the paragraph about communism and kind of the approach to thinking of about the collective, the empire, capitalism, and I
mm.
was shocked where like it's what was not a lot of pages, 10, no,
7 maybe.
7 pages, but the ideas packed in those 7 pages,
Dude, for real, for
heavy.
real.
But the beginning of it, I really liked. Well, it brought the first part of the Outrage Society, and I think we talked about this before. Was it an egregore or egregore?
Mhm,
Right.
egregore, yeah. As far as
Uh,
I know, yeah.
And so that's kind of what I was envisioning. What the swarm is trying to be described as, like a thought form,
Mm,
but it has no physical entity, right? It's not
mm,
capable of really moving
right.
and taking action. So that's and what was it? The I highlighted a few things. Um, oh, digital outrage cannot be sung. Oh, this whole part too.
Mm,
When they talk about the Iliad, right? And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
we're
yeah.
moving into this new culture of the sound, or what is it? It's a new culture we're moving into. The sorry, I can't find the exact word I want to use. But in regards to the Iliad and how it's actually a song, not a book, right? And
Mm,
we're moving into this area of crowds, right? So when the Iliad was being sung, it was to a crowd. So we're back to where the Iliad was, right? In the same
okay.
type of mind state, headspace of that those people were in. They didn't have a screen, but everyone gathered collectively, basically stared at one person singing a song, perhaps on a stage, maybe with a play, to add to it. So I feel like we're back somehow. I think through the power of writing and the isolation of the individual through writing and reading, we got away from that culture of the singing culture and memorization, and we
Mm,
moved into the state of the individual, right? And then now we're moving back into that space of the crowd, of the swarm, of the collective. And I'm kind of butchering my thoughts about that. because but that's kind of what I got from that for those first 2 pages was the transition, kind of what's like the Heraclitus quote: "What scatters gathers, what gathers scatters." So you have the space of the Iliad, the singing of that, what that does to the collective, and then we go to the individual. We go to reading and writing and isolation, and now we're coming out
Yeah,
of
yeah.
reading and writing and isolation and going back into the swarm. It's a different thing, even I think from what it was in the past. But um,
Yes.
sorry for kind of rambling there. But what are your thoughts on that or the
No.
first 2 pages as well, or first couple pages?
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome 'cause I remember reading the Iliad in high school or whenever, and, I it didn't think I was just like, "Oh, that's a book," and then I read it, but I kind of, like, blank things out, but now I'm like, "Oh, that was first, that it was sung to crowds," and then you're saying, "Oh, we're going to take it from us being in a communal space, all listening and experiencing something and having this collective like a concert, we're all experiencing this together, and then now we're going to, over time, take you to just books where you sit in a spot by yourself. You could even be with other people, but everyone might be reading like sustained silent reading where everyone's reading, but they might be reading different books or they might be at a different point. So even that starts to, like you said, isolate and put us into that solitude. And then and so then it promotes even further. So the next technology is now that because in the beginning of the book, he talks about the printing press and how now this digital technology is going to be just as transformative as the printing press. And it, it's it's different. Mm, and I just didn't think of like, the progression like that. So I think that's oh, and then about rage, right? Because he's talking about this is like one of the first major um stories that we have in Western culture, and it starts off with like rage, like this anger, something beyond anger. So then I started to think like, what does outrage mean? And so then I pulled up this one on, and then after this I'll head it back to you. But it made me think of that meme. Can you see that, or is it too small?
Uh,
Maybe.
yeah, I can see it. They take out the chip and they put something
Yeah.
else in.
Yeah, the way it's quote, waves of outrage often occur in response to events of only meager social or political relevance. And my brain went right to that meme with the chip, and they'll say insert current outrage and so
Yes.
it just easily we just kind of get so that, and then the last bit, I thought people are performative with their outrage. It feels it feels like it's simply social signaling, i.e.,
Mm,
whatever the latest news bulletin is mentioning, that people become outraged. And like the first one I thought was like climate crisis, and oh, okay, now
yes.
we all have to be. But now a few years later, people I guess are still talking about, but it's not the same outrage. So that's my first kind of hit off of what you were kind of mentioning.
And the interesting thing about this outrage, or it's you can tap into the fact that like why is it occurring and why is it sustaining? I think it's the reinforcement, right? So the reinforcement of the algorithms that are intending to benefit from this, right? Conflict, or they used to call it clickbait titles. Maybe they still do. And
Mm,
I just think about in that aspect of like someone could almost tune the outrage to any frequency to the meme, right? And then guide it
mhm,
and generate it, and then sustain it by creating a behavioral plan with a reinforcement rate where if
mm,
they post things, then culturally you're going to have bots or people say that post is a post with liking. So then, therefore, they're reaffirmed in those beliefs of outrage, right? And then again, they still take no action. Like it's the whole I posted the black square thing. It's or
mm,
I stand in solidarity. I was like, I mean, kind of just words, right? Or I mean, they're not even words; they're pictures. It's almost non-action more than anything else. It's signaling. Yeah, to your point, it is. It's signaling, and it's fascinating what it does to, I think, people and how it's we're all building our character and our identity, and I think we
mm,
all want to be seen as socially acceptable, right? And then the script or whatever socially is acceptable is changing so fast, and people have to reaffirm that they're in tune with society. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, just yeah, that it's happening so fast that they are just like, oh shoot, I have to pivot and I have to now perform again. This word I heard it recently, like performative signaling that you're like, oh, me too. I'm really upset about this. But then it's like a week later, something happens, and you're like, by this point, and after a couple months, you're fatigued. And I think a lot of people are just fatigued. They're like, oh shit, now it's this. Let me how do I prepare to be outraged for this and signal? And meanwhile, everyone else is like I'm tired, but like I guess some people they can't break that pattern for whatever, yeah, for whatever reason.
Yeah, certainly. And the outrage fatigue's real, right? And I think like political fatigue too, like every 4 years with the election, like I'm already fatigued before we even know who's running, or I'm just already over it, right? But it's gonna be, I think, a heavy news cycle going forward where it's just gonna be uh I would just say, people are gonna press on the gas to try to signal where this country's going. And if you don't signal appropriately to everybody else, you're this or you're that. But I think it's gonna be maybe a fun year and a half we got ahead of us.
Oh dear. Oh dear. I'm not ready.
Politics, politics, politics. But that kind of outrage is seasonal, right? Um,
Right.
and then it sustains itself. But after that, um, it's like nobody wants to hear anything about politics, or like get sports, some terrible news story. It's always
Yeah.
an immediate transition. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then it goes back to, because in the first chapter he kind of breaks down scandal, and I had to look up what scandal was, like something about moral sensibilities and offending the moral sensibilities. And I'm thinking, then if it's not politics, then a different PR company or a different industry is going to be like, well, it's our turn. This is football season, so now we need to generate outrage, and this player is not being treated or given the fair pay for whatever reason, or they're not supporting this group or that group, and then people are like, well, we have to be upset now because of this. So that's my first thought on that one.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They even made a platform for like Sports Center, where
Mm,
it was. I feel like when I was young in the '90s, the History Channel had history documentaries. Animal Planet was about animals. It's weird. It was a weird world. But Sports Center was about sports, and then it was about the stats, right? Like here's the stat. That's kind of how I remember it, at least as a child. And
mm-hmm.
now looking at what Sports Center has become, it's basically, the entertainment, Fox, CNN type of entertainment for people who are interested in sports. Like, here's the latest, insights into the troubles plaguing the team and the drama, or whatever it might be. Kyrie Irving, this, or and then they use these social movements as part of like now what is sports. Where I feel like before it was just like, up next we have the Yankees versus the Mets,
Right.
and it's not like that anymore.
What's crazy is I don't follow baseball, but my mom, she watches now that baseball's up, the Yankees and stuff. And I recently saw that on the pitcher mound, on the bottom like circle where the pitcher's standing on the bottom right side, there's a little advertisement. At first I thought there was like an actual banner on the mound, and my mom's like, no, they digitally impose that on the mound, and then it changes from like game to game. So they're constantly now like putting all of these advertisements in the game. And I
Wow.
was like, even that, like in a year from now, it won't just be like, the brand of mitt that they sell at certain companies, whatever. It'll be something even more social related.
That's wild.
Yeah, for
Yeah, and
real.
then they'll have like maybe a hologram game before of like all the greats, and it's just a couple innings and CGI or something. Who
I could see
knows?
it for sure. Yeah, I could see it for sure.
Bring it back.
Um, yeah. So what I was gonna go to, and let me pull it up that way we can kind of peep it. And this is just a quick one. Quote, outrage society is scandal society. It lacks bearing, reserve, and posture. And my brain, when I hear something like posture, it just goes to like people I notice are physically changing, their posture is transforming, and I think of like the upper chest is starting to round forward. People have more lower back problems and tighter hips. And then I thought like it's almost like they're slowly transforming people into like the Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. What's the movie? The Time Machine? Not the movie, the book, but it is a movie too, right? The Time Machine.
Yes.
And that's basically the story about like two groups of people who one devolved and the other one stayed on top. And
Okay.
yeah, I can totally see we are headed towards that. And I do think because you see our minds are changing. People are trying to normalize everything like oh, society's always been this way, right? The amount of
Mm, mm.
people who are, finding out who they are for themselves or finding out they're autistic or it's not a crisis and it's never we're just getting better at recognizing all these unique individuals. But my opinion is I think the human brain is changing, right? I think
Yeah.
developmentally it's changed in the past 20 years faster than the human brain has ever changed. And I don't think people are understanding that aspect of it, but I think corporations do. I think they're understanding how our minds are, even if they're changing, they probably understand it, our minds better now than any other king in the past has ever understood his people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, totally. There's all these not that I know enough, but like there are different think tank groups or military think tank groups that they do nothing but spend billions of dollars on like figuring out how the tech works and then working on tweaking it and then I was even hearing that like the woman, her name's Allison McDowell, and she does a lot of good YouTube stuff, and she was talking about something about light rays being able to implant thoughts. And I'm going to look at, and I'll send you whatever I actually find on it. But so I'm like, even that we can create false memories through light signals
Yes.
is real. She's like, no, there's actual research and proof behind this. It's not like conjecture.
Yeah, it's probably patented, right? So like that's one of the probably the easiest ways to prove things like that. It's insane. And yeah, the idea to beam thoughts into your head, I think that's always been the idea, right? That's what a television is.
Mm-hmm.
It's this idea of they want you to buy Maxwell's coffee. Okay. They want that image of the cup going into they want the image of the pot going into the cup and the steam coming up and a big smile and you to associate that with Maxwell. So like they beam that vision into your head.
Mm,
Then you go to Maxwell, you go to the grocery store, you see Maxwell's and then you think, that's gonna make me happy in the morning. Um, and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they tried to do that with radio, right? Like with tunes. So they would
Mm,
find catchy tunes that would stick in your head all day. Radio's way of trying to get in your head was different than the TV's. But the idea was to make something sticky for it to last.
oh yeah, for real. A quick one that comes to mind is dun 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 dun, and it's
Yeah.
like you could do that, and someone who you've never met would already you could just the first part dun 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 dun, and then they'll do the call and response portion of it. It's like even that, and I think what I heard was that a jingle developed like over 100 years ago. It's like that's sticky if that's still here.
Absolutely. And I
That's
wonder,
a good
like,
word, sticky.
yeah, I wonder if like AI is, well, I imagine it is, but it's being used to do things to us. And when I say that, I think like bots or like comments and chat, like or
Hmm.
like you go to a Yahoo or let's say any like maybe a Reddit and you read comments, right? And then that is impacting you as well. Like this whole idea of like guiding the human mind to a certain position or a place of thought. And then what is it, nudging? And then they really want you over here.
Mm.
But you can't see how far that you have to go and what they're going to use to move you there. And I think it's done with propaganda. Like I think about the news in a month calendar frame where I believe they have every day planned, right? News article here, news article
Yeah.
here. And so I just feel like with all this information, you can start people off at the beginning of a month with no idea, what's going on. Then by the end of the month, maybe they're going to the doctor to get a prescription because this brand new groundbreaking science comes out, and it's going to change their life. So
Yeah, yeah. It's really creepy because, as aware as I think I am about all of this, I know that I'm being bombarded and saturated with all of this imagery and subliminal stuff. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't affect me. Or like, but I know that on some level it's seeping into my subconscious. And then I'm acting out certain things and behaving certain ways. And I'm trying to be super aware of it. But like, if that's me, then think about like people who have no real inclination or desire to, kind of do research and be, proactive in their consumption. It's like, yeah, you could probably lead some people very easily.
yeah, absolutely. And there's I don't know, the entrapment stories where the FBI gets people to do things sometimes. There's like one
Mm,
from Oklahoma where the kid was like disabled, mentally disabled, and the mom's like,
mm-mm.
"Holy shit, like anybody who knows my kid should know,
Yeah.
like like what it's weird, right? The internet's a weird place where you really I did the FBI know that? I have no clue, but it's just basically open access to everybody. And you're dealing with all types of people, from maybe low intellectual ability to, you know, psychotic, high IQ, stuck
Mm-hmm.
in a basement, hates the world. Who knows? I think it's a pretty big spectrum. And with that, everybody's participating in this digital swarm, right? And what is free will in this swarm when you're being
Mm,
uh,
mm,
told what outrage to, or told, this person needs to be canceled, or this person needs to be supported because they're trying to be canceled. And it's, yeah, well, it's tough to be an individual in this form. I don't even know if it's possible,
well,
right?
it's so, yeah, I think that's really awesome that you're, because I would have not said that. And I do think like at least me talking to you is trying to at least create two nodes that have like, okay, we at least are acknowledging like this is an occurrence, and
Hmm.
okay, at least now we can have more awareness. And my goal is that at least more people read this material, and then there's more people that have this kind of, that they can build some framework around what this technology is, and how it's super powerful. And I'm, not like, I'm not terrified of it, but I'm also like, hey, we really don't know how to have respect for what this technology is. It's like a gun in a way. It could change people's lives for the better, or it could destroy people's lives.
Certainly. And I feel like we are the experiments, right? Like, because there's no longitudinal study for someone who's had a cell phone in their pocket for 80 years, right? There's no
For real.
longitudinal study for someone who's had 20,000 hours of screen time and X amount of years.
Yes,
Like, there's
yes.
nothing for that. So, like, everything we try to explain for all these people, all these elements, like, it's always got to be something else besides technology and the screen, right? Because that is their strongest tool. They'll never, I feel like, as far as society's going forward, like, screens are here to stay, and they'll never be associated with anything really negative too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The CDC does recommend, and this is funny about the CDC, they do recommend children under 2 get 0 hours of screen time.
Mm.
I was like, oh, you know what? I agree with that. And pediatrician, somebody in my family talked to or whatever, also recommended that. I was like, that makes sense. I'm glad more people are at least coming out and being aware, like, yes, screens do impact the development of infants all the way up to 2. And it's important to be aware of that. Um, but I think it's overlooked, though, in a lot of ways in society, where, like, you see, like, well, who knows that information? Is it being given to the right people? And even the people who find that out, are they in a position to where maybe they're a single mother, like they're not, they it's, you can imagine how people could see a screen as necessary
Mm.
for being maybe what would the term be, like a capable parent perhaps, or yeah, maybe that's the best word, but screens, yeah, they're powerful, man. And the digital swarm is coming. What are your thoughts?
Um, yeah, even the idea of like you're under 2 and you shouldn't see a screen. It's like it's so the screen is so ubiquitous now that like you can't avoid it. As you know, you're gonna go somewhere, and even if your like parents are trying to do all of this proactive stuff, you're still gonna come across it.
You go to a restaurant and they just have them all
Yep.
over, right? You
Yep.
go anywhere. It's yeah, inescapable, right? The airports, I mean, the gyms have all the screens too.
Right,
Um,
right. You might want to just be there in your body, but you know, right above your treadmill or like at Planet Fitness when I first started working out, um, I saw, you know, a line of television flat screens. It's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think you can avoid it anymore. I think the screens are here.
Absolutely. What quote do you want to go to next, or is this what do you have
I
here?
was kind of, we're having like so many nice conversations, so I was just gonna kind of maybe see if I could go to what is this? I'm just trying to delete and I can't. Okay. Maybe this one. Rage is the heroic medium of action. On this score, rage is fundamentally different from anger, the effect of waves of outrage. Digital outrage cannot be sung. Oh, this is what you're talking about. It admits neither action nor narration. Instead, it is an affective condition, devoid of the power to act. And then I said, rage doesn't just create an affect in people. Oh no, I think he says this. It stirs them into action. And then yeah, the general distraction and dissipation characterizing society today prevent the epic energy of rage from arising. Rage, in the strong sense, is more than an affective state. It means the capacity or power to interrupt existing conditions and bring about new ones. In this way, it produces the future. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and then I said, makes me think of the movie Network that where he's like, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. He's like, the first thing you have to do is just be mad, right?
Certainly. And it's incentivized, right? And the content and everything, like it's weird. It's even if you try to talk to people, if you want to get someone's attention, like maybe uh since people on Twitter or Instagram, people have the opportunity now to like talk to celebrities, right? And if you
Mm-hmm.
just say something nice, they're gonna look right over it. But if you chirp at them and then you say something negative, those are the ones that they're gonna respond to, which is fascinating. So like even it's perverse. Like, oh, maybe I like this person, but the only way I can get their attention is to be outraged.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it's yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it goes back to what he was saying about scandal, and so if attention is the biggest thing that we're looking for, bigger than money. We're looking for attention as much as we can. Then how do we get this attention? And unfortunately, it's not like these good deeds that you might have done. I personally, I like hearing about good stuff and things that people have done to help maybe their family or their community. I really get jazzed on that. Or like that they did a really good workout and they've been working out for the past couple weeks and they've been swimming or whatever it is. I get jazzed to hear that kind of stuff. But it seems like a lot of people are being conditioned to just want to hear the the scandal so that they can become outraged, and then it leeches from them.
Yeah, and the outrage is kind of cushioned by the fact that they share this sentiment, right? So it's a shared sentiment. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
I know you're outraged. I'm outraged too. Pat on the back. Like we're in this together. Kind of outrage, which is interesting, right? Because you think if people came together, they could calm each other down, but that's not what happens. They end up just agitating or uh, provoking it forward. And I was thinking about my one conflict with maybe this part of the section where sometimes it says, and I feel like for the most part there are maybe more instances where the outrage becomes nothing, right? It dissipates. It turns into a 2 week headline or whatever. But there are
Mm,
moments I do feel like where the news has galvanized a story, perhaps, and then the collective media and our culture echoes it and whatever it is, and then maybe that local population feels as though they're acting upon the voice of everybody else who is, is being reported as being outraged over whatever incident it might be. So I feel like there is, for the most part, maybe the swarm never has the collective ability to take action, but if the collective story focuses on an individual place with a community, they're the only ones with the collective action or the ability to invoke anything. Which brings it back to like the digital off ramp. Like, what is the only way to uh, do something with the outrage? Like, I guess if it's about your local town or community, maybe the Ohio spill, right? You go out and you
Mhm.
protest. If that's what everybody's talking about and they're outraged about at that moment, um, and it's your town, maybe it's your job to take that outrage and go to the streets, the digital off ramp. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like that where it makes me think maybe you could be in a, that you hear everyone else is outraged about the thing that you are outraged, and like you can actually create change. So then you have this empowerment, you're energized through the story. I like what, that the story is informing you and you feel, okay, I'm not alone on this, so I'm going to then, and again, it all like I think it has to be physically, there has to be the body in space moving and interacting with other bodies. That way they form the crowd. And it's going back to like what he was saying, that back in the 1900s or whatever, that was the era of crowds, and that something could be done through like union workers, and that they could actually challenge dominant relations, dominant power relations. Whereas now, people, like you said, if they could just go out and meet other people, then something different might come from that.
Certainly. Um, I think it would come. Yeah, something different would come out from that. Like if the town of people of Ohio, Norfolk, not Norfolk, but where was it? I can remember the train. If they all, you just imagine everybody had to evacuate, but they all went back to their houses and then they stayed inside. I would imagine watching the
Mm,
screens or like just seeing what other people are saying about their town.
yeah,
And then they're back where they're back in this digital swarm, even though the focal point of the event is down the street, so to speak.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the other idea brings up, I don't know what kind of, for me, tracks the history of this. Like when you mention unions and clubs, the book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, I believe. Are you familiar with that?
I've never read it, but go on.
It's basically tracks, well, like why is there a big decline in community and participation, right? Like, so there's a huge boom, I guess, where everybody was like joining unions and clubs and different types of events, and then the phone came along, and then different things like came along, two cars or the TV, obviously, and then the internet. But what Robert Putnam shows is throughout America, uh, there's just a complete decline in community engagement. Um,
Mm,
and he asked the question like, why is this happening? And he puts forth, I think, a lot of you know ideas and reasons why. And then when he wrote the book, the idea of like the internet being the next thing was like, it was just coming like, oh, it's the internet. For me, when I was in college, like the internet's even taking this more away, right? This idea of community and participation by having a faux representation of it online. Like, don't go to the hunting and fishing club in your local
mm,
community. Just go to this website where everybody talks and posts pictures about it. You don't need to talk to people in your community about hunting and fishing. Don't join that
mhm.
club. But yeah, there's been a long decline of community participation in America, and I think it's maybe even, and if it is, I think if I see community participation now, it's on a macro level, like a large protest against something, right? That's kind of the things I've seen. I don't
Right.
see like as much micro community participation where I would like to. And but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's awesome because a little bit later on, he was talking about things being privatized. So the third space of like, well, you go to church, so you have a third space, I guess, right? But like a lot of people, they don't have their community centers anymore, or the library, or at least for me, the gym is my third space. And so now they just have their work in their home, but that third space is where you meet physical bodies, you talk about these ideas. And now it's like, well, if you want to have that third space, there's a third party that is kind of brokering that experience where, I get it, private gyms, or gyms, you have to have membership. And I think that's great. But just the lack of like there being the community center that is paid for by the people of that town, um,
Yeah.
is being taken away. So now, and then all this stuff, the third parties are making money off of it, which is great. But it's just what they can kind of pull from that. Anyway, that's not really going into it, but that's my thought about the community, where it's like it's no longer these small in your little 5-10 block radius. It's, if it's anything, like you said, it's for a big protest, like a nationwide type protest.
Yeah. And we don't have protests in my city or in my state too often, but for some reason 2 years ago, or I don't remember when it was, when there was all these protests going on in America, somehow
Mm.
it got to my city, and like there was a bunch of non-local people. Like, what's, you know
Ooh.
what I mean? Like that's the whole idea, right? Like all these non-local people came to the city, and it was like, look at this event, and like nobody at that event lived there. Or like there were people who went to it reactionary, like the locals, like what the hell's going on? But the main movement was like people from out of town or like from another city. And it makes sense, like I guess, to go here, but and make an incident of it. And then in that incident, someone fired off a gun too, which is crazy, which never
Mm.
happens in uh, this area. It's like, of course, like when does that happen? And they have this wild protest that seems manufactured. But
Mm.
um, yeah, on these little local levels, you're right. The church is basically the strongest unit in my area, in my community.
Mm.
And that's where everybody kind of congregates every Sunday, I would suppose. But outside of that, um, there's, I feel like the church has, at least the events are like the third party events are, in my mind, like our church will organize events like a stake dance for the youth, and they
Yeah.
create these things in some regards, or they call it Mormons are known for church ball. They love, we have church ball leagues, very serious about church ball. um, so those are kind of the things I have in my mind, but um, I don't know how popular they still are, or if they're waning in interest because people have VR, or they can play crazy, insane video games where they can be something besides who they are. But
Right, right.
go ahead.
I mean, and then it's like, okay, well, you're on Xbox Live and you're having these, Call of Duty experiences. And, I know people that have meaningful friendships that they've built online with other people that they've never met. And then, after 5 years talking to this person, they physically meet them and they actually, have this digital off ramp moment of like bonding. And I mean, it was incredible to watch it. But going back to it, it's like, Xbox gets to broker this experience. They get to be the person, it feels just, I don't know if like it's good that people are interacting, but also that there's a third party that's able to kind of be a fly on the wall. They can see everything that's happening, and they're only their their only purpose. Yeah, it's all like through that and through money.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Like I think back to my youth and how I looked at the older kids that were 10, 15 years older. Like what did they do that I thought was cool? Like they would hang out in parking lots with their cars,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's just high school kids just all hanging out. Like that
yeah.
was what I think a lot of kids in the 90s did, or that I looked up to, or they would I like, they played street hockey. They
Mm.
it was a lot of farms and fields. So just, I don't know, it was just like it was a different world when I looked up to them. And now I think about even schools where I was fortunate to go to high school where you weren't locked down for lunch, right? You could
Mm,
go get food anywhere you wanted. But even now, like now you're locked down, um, and you're forced to stay on that campus and forced to interact with or not interact with, that community. But it's just looking back, I feel like there was more independent freedom that individuals took, and then that freedom led them to meet and hang out and socialize. And it's I just feel like now people just do that online, right?
mhm.
They just have that shared experience online. They had Zoom meetings, right? And the past 3 years reinforced this idea that you can have these moments with these people, your loved ones or your friends,
Yeah, yeah.
and it doesn't equate to me.
No, no. Yeah. Um, that whole Zoom thing, right when it first started, I was like, "All right, like, I guess this is a thing." And I was teaching some classes, like stretch classes online, but, yeah, after a little bit, I was like, "Yeah, this is like, so, it's like a facsimile of any type of interaction that we could have." And I'm thinking, being in that parking lot back in the '90s and everyone, they pull up in their car and they all I never had this experience, but they're there, and it allows for more, um unpredictable, spontaneous occurrences, whereas now anything that happens online has a chance of being manufactured by the platform that is bringing everyone together because they know what yeah, so go ahead.
No, no, you keep going.
But no, no,
Yeah,
you go, because I was gonna keep rambling.
I like it. I like when you ram. Do you have a lot to say? And I'm listening. I'm learning. But it is interesting. Yeah, the space, the third party. Like you go to any website or a video game, then that month is Stop Asian Hate. So like then the conversation even maybe starts there, or then the
Sure,
conversation
sure.
moves into it's pro Women's Month, or it's LGBTQ month, or it's what is it, Black History Month. So then each platform you go to kind of has already this lining for you to maybe jump off or have a conversation from, or take note, or pay tribute, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, even that where then it could be that you're experiencing something in life where there's something novel happening, and you would be excited to talk about that, but because main discourse is talking about, whatever it is that's being pushed, that you think, "Oh, well, actually, I'm not really gonna talk about that," or you don't even think it's worth sharing, so then it kinda just fizzles out in your mind, and what that could have been a seed, that could have been something really, novel in our world that, would yeah, novel.
Certainly, yeah, and it is interesting. Yeah, when I was thinking the word package, when they package each month, and they
Mm,
guide us through each month now, and like some months are already set. July in America is, usually associated with American history, freedom. October's
right, right.
Halloween, and so some of these months are prepackaged, but others are not, or are they're trying to. And so each month they're kind of, yeah, cushioning and pushing you towards certain conversations or a dialogue. And do if you don't feel like you're inspired to talk or share because the conversation's flooded with maybe one type of resonance, one type of voice, you're
Mhm.
like, well, why bring this up? Everybody's only talking about, you know, this issue or that issue. And so then to your point, yeah, it could have been a seed because somebody could have saw your issue and brought it into the main line of thinking, and then extrapolate from there on how it's related, or maybe there's a road to a different path of thinking. But yeah, I think it's so important to maybe just share your thoughts, even if everybody else is talking about something else sometimes. Um,
Yeah, I like that too, because what I appreciate from your streaming is this talking out loud, and you're sharing, because you say the thoughts that you have and you might be running in your mind kind of are different, and the whole experience is different when you say this out loud. And I think even that is like a great piece of advice, or thing to now try and experience in my physical life. So now physically, I'm trying to say things more out loud, and I'm noticing that my thoughts are changing and the way I can form ideas are changing. And
Wow.
so yeah, I mean that you've shared like a really awesome thought that you had, and you're presenting it also.
Yeah, and I think the idea of like I think I maybe style how I do it in some way, but a lot of it I think is from an essayist named William Hasley, one of his essays. So this idea of thinking, um, and how a silent mind is not a thinking mind, and a thinking mind is one that talks out loud. And
Mm,
because when I say silent mind, I mean that would be including like having thoughts in your head that would still be considered silent, um, not just like a meditative silence. But I do think it's important, yeah. And when you do talk out loud, like to me, it helps in my personal life solve problems of like, where did I put my keys? I'll say it out, I'll
yeah,
say it out
yeah,
loud. Like I think and then little things like that. I don't do it all the time, but I do feel like it's really important for me to say things out loud to guide my life or to invoke thoughts like or a memory or if I just think it and I'm just silent in my head and I can't say where are my keys out loud, I think it makes it more difficult for me to find them.
yeah, yeah. And the thought that came was like there's a weight to even the words. The words as they leave your mouth, they have a vibration and they have mass. They have something, or at least they're creating space, and they're impacting the physical world. Whereas if it's just in the head, it doesn't have that same weight. And so what does
Yeah,
that mean? That vibration is going out and pinging off of other things.
I think it's important, right? Like they have studies about like plants and saying nice things to them, and it's weird to
Mhm.
even think like if you're talking in your head, right? I think there's studies that indicate like your tongue's still moving as if you are talking. So like even then, that's just a smaller vibration, right? Of
Mm.
what you're doing, and that's why sometimes people think they can read minds. Perhaps I don't, I'm not saying I can read minds, but maybe like have some insight into what people are thinking. Maybe they just it's a crazy thought, but there's something in them that can hear that person's tongue
Oh,
moving in their mouth and
oh,
they are keen
totally.
to that. But
To
go ahead.
Totally. I think things are getting really weird. I keep like kind of saying that to my wife, and I think I've had a couple experiences with my daughter, and I've had a thought, and this isn't it's happened more than once. I'll have the thought, and then she'll interact with me without having spoken, and we'll have an interaction that's like, "Oh yeah, I totally know what you're saying, and here you go," or say something that I was thinking, so some wild stuff. I think you're onto something. I don't think it's that far out.
Well, that's good to hear. Sometimes I like I just I feel tentative in saying some things because people can be
Mm,
dismissive or like oh woo woo, and I don't mind being woo woo, or
mhm.
like but because I am kind of silly. But yeah, the whole idea of language too, and the masses and the swarm, and the shortening of speech, right, to 250 or whatever the thing is,
Yeah, oh
limiting
dear.
our internal mind and our internal critique. And there's other things too, like even changing our reading patterns, right? Like how people read, it's diminishing our reading ability
Mm,
because there's a study, it's called the F-shaped study, where it just says that, and then maybe there's people who don't agree with it, this study, but you're trained to read in an F pattern, so like which isn't good for, I guess, comprehension, right?
okay.
If you're missing half a sentence, so the F pattern indicates that the first line of the sentence, the headline you read, the second line you read about halfway through, and then you just scroll down the rest. Perhaps might be
Ah.
the idea behind that. And so then people get in this bad or poor reading habit just by spending too much time reading online. And I think it's a fascinating thing where, like, not only are they changing, I think in some ways, minimally our ability to read, but our ability to think in ways past 250 characters or whatever.
Oh, yeah, without doubt. And then I bring it back to, like, just the physical world, and, um, for me I said a couple of weeks ago when I first was doing the digital off-ramp idea that, like, some people, they've never done a pull-up in their life, and they don't even know that that's a possibility, And then I
Yeah.
go further. Like this is like my whole like little campaign I hope to at least do for my whole life. I believe I could with enough time I could teach anyone how to do a handstand. And
Wow.
maybe it's not free, maybe not freestanding, but I believe I could teach anyone to go against the wall, whether that's walking up the wall with their feet or even kicking up. I think all of us have these untapped physical abilities that we most people don't understand that they have. Even the idea of like swinging from branches, that used to be a thing that more people could do. I think and that's going back to like just the idea of reading comprehension and how our brains are being repatterned and being trained to not do what the full capacity is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more, right? In this idea that there are things we don't even know we're capable of. And I like to your point about physical attributes, I think the same thing about children, right? Like I think every child is born a genius. Like I don't, I really believe that. Obviously, I think there's a lot of things that dictate how a child's life turns out, but um, I think we're all born geniuses, and we all have, like you said, these abilities with our bodies that we might not be aware of. And I do, I'm in full support of that. Like, and this idea that you have as well is important. Like, it is true, and you should believe that you can teach anybody to do a handstand, right? Like, that's real. Um, and I like that because, and I also believe in telling people like every kid's a genius, right? Like, you just got to find out how to get that out of them, right, and help them get that
Agreed.
out of themselves, right. It's a long and complicated process, and I don't think there's here's the right way to do it. It's takes a lifetime um to help somebody, I think. But
Yeah, yeah. It goes to like having that proper the correct not the correct the right teacher that is there to help you find your walk in the woods. Help you carve your own path. Maybe and that goes to like pedagogy and how different minds learn and stuff. And I think that it's unfortunate too that teachers should be um, valued way more in our society, but in modern day it's a shame. I think it's such a it really makes me upset that we don't give these people more support and we value it more. We send that for other stuff.
absolutely, it takes me back to like the origin of like what is a teacher, like in Rome, like they were slaves, right.
Mm,
And then today's society, like not much to they're slave to the government in some sense. They're forced to, I think, uh the public, I think the school systems are a form of like labor camps in some sense. But uh and these teachers, I feel bad because they have to give more and more authority to the state or to the curriculum, and the ability for a teacher now to really, I think, do what they want is so limited in our school systems. We're like,
mm,
that's how far I mean, how much respect we don't have for teachers, right? Like, we're like, they got to follow all these books, they got to teach these exact things, and there's drama and conflict over what these teachers can and can't teach, and it's being propagandized, right? um and like, so I feel like to your point, like there's no respect for teachers in America. And the system is kind of broken, unfortunately. Like, good teachers quit. When I
right.
was in my educational experience, all the teachers were young, like in graduate school, right. And then, but I remembered when I was little, like my teachers in elementary school, like gray hair, kind
Yeah.
of older, like these,
Yeah.
older women, mother figures, in almost some sense. And now we have a rather large school system where we have really young teachers who uh, don't, I think, develop into good teachers. And there's a lot of barriers to becoming a good teacher. And they're so important, right? I think one of the most important things that that drives the future of America, we don't have respect for them. We're constantly telling them like how to teach, what to teach.
Hmm.
It's the and the system too, where, I mean, I could talk about an educational system forever, so I'll just stop rambling. But I'm in total agreement. Like, oh man, it bothers me. The educational system bothers me a lot in this situation it's in. I'm in pain about it.
Mm, mm.
But your thoughts?
Uh, oh yeah, I mean,
Oh, what's this?
I'm gonna. I don't want to take you up too much longer. Do you have time to do just a little bit more? Like maybe we talk one more kind of point that I found.
Yeah, let's close strong.
Okay. Oh, this is kind of interesting. He talks about the digital swarm has no spirit. He talks about crowds versus swarm. So Gustav Le Bon and his idea of crowds, um, and then the swarm members no longer have a profile of their own. And then anonymity of online makes it difficult for the mass to form into a crowd. So the people end up becoming a swarm because they have no name and are not physically connected to each other. Yeah, and then I say, oh, this is kind of the same thing. There's something about sharing physical space with another human being that's still irreplaceable. And then the quote, it takes a soul, a common spirit to fuse people into a crowd. The swarm demonstrates no internal coherence. It does not speak with a voice. And then he goes, the shitstorm lacks a voice too. Accordingly, it's perceived as noise. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because you think about this like
mm,
the whole cancel movement. Canceled by who? Then maybe it'll be a business or this, but when people get canceled, it's the swarm is, not connected physically. It's not, who is they and who canceled. But yeah, that's fascinating. And then what was can you pull that back up and then add another thought
sure.
about the first thing you read?
I'll go back up.
It was, this. It's and I its members no longer have a profile of their own, right? And there was another
Mm,
point too that where like they create an identity. Um
right. Yeah.
and
Oh, okay. I see what. Yeah, that's later on. Let me
oh
because he talks about. Oh, yeah, nobody
I
versus anonymous,
yeah.
and
And I have,
it says.
go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
No, you I'm waiting for you. I think
Okay.
you got it.
He says he is not a nobody, but a somebody. And then this, I was like, and then he says an anonymous somebody. And then
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what do you make of that idea? I said the nobody allows for shirking of any responsibility or consequence. With no responsibility, there are no repercussions for your statements or actions. People want to be nobodies so they can act like savages.
Yeah. I feel like that's I see that in me like, oh, who am I as a content creator? I think a
Mm-hmm.
nobody. And that allows
Mm.
me for shirking of any real responsibility of talking about Ukraine of any serious tone or any of these other things because I see myself as a nobody in the swarm, right?
Ah,
So like that resonated with me on that part. Um, all right, so this whole thing, may I read it?
please.
In contrast, today's Homo digitalis, right, is anything but nobody. He retains his private identity even when forming part of the swarm. Although he expresses himself anonymously, as a rule, he has a profile. So I have a profile as a rule.
Right,
So
right.
he's speaking to me, and I think he's correct. And he works ceaselessly to optimizing it, and I am like in
Yeah,
some sense
yeah,
working to optimize my profile. I do see it in more of like a what I'm doing as a game analogy, but I agree with what he's writing here. And instead of being nobody, he is insistently somebody exhibiting himself and vying for attention. Absolutely. Right.
yeah,
The mass mediated nobody, on the other hand, does not claim attention for himself. His private identity is extinguished. He has vanished into the mass. This also represents his good fortune. After all, if he is nobody, he cannot be anonymous. Um,
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah.
uh, that's kind of where I'm at. But I it's weird reading that, right? Like, oh, he's talking about me, or like, I don't know if he is or if because
Yeah,
however you read for yourself. I can't escape that.
sure, of
Um,
course.
Someone would read that and like not make those connections. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is awesome, like, the way that this is, coming about. But yeah, because he says, "Because people know there is a somebody behind." Oh, Being anonymous, if this is what I'm thinking, being anonymous indicates that you are somebody, but you're choosing not to show your full self. There can be repercussions for your actions if you are anonymous because people know that there is a somebody behind that anonymity. And then my first thought was makes me think of the idea of people being doxxed. And
Yeah, certainly.
yeah, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, that makes me think of that as well. That's what people would do, right? Like, so that's the idea of like everyone's trying to take, like, I guess, Wizard of Oz, see who's behind the curtain, right?
Mhm.
As an act of like, now there's no escaping it. You are fully enveloped by the swarm. And you've been like, it's almost like how you would think an autoimmune reaction would occur in the body with white blood cells when naturally, like, oh, look, they swarm it and they do their best to maybe disable it and, you know, make it a neutral factor.
Mhm. Mhm.
Your thoughts?
Um No, I like that. Because even that, I had to really chew on that. Like an anonymous, and I'll pull it up really quick. An anonymous somebody, like that's a wild idea.
I
Um,
I can think of quote unquote streamers or people who are somebody in some way, but nobody knows they're anonymous, right? It's a weird thing. What else you got? We might have to do a part two
you think so?
or a next chapter.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, dude, I am enjoying this so much. I could definitely, resume and do a like second half of the 7 pages, man. It's crazy. You're right. Like even within the 7 pages, there's so much. Each paragraph is so dense with like ideas that I'm like, I took a lot of time to kind of just like chew these ideas over, and this is just the first time I'm kind of even thinking about it.
Yeah, and I like it. This well, the book, it's weird, like you suggested it to me. I like Marshall McLuhan a lot. I like this topic
Okay.
or the discussion, and I'm a big fan of it in general. So the first part of the book when I was reading it, um, I really, yeah, that's what drew me in, right? It felt like another chapter of somebody picking up where Marshall McLuhan left off.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and, that's why I think he makes a reference to the printing press. Like that's the Gutenberg's Galaxy. Is that the McLuhan book or something?
Mm,
Um, and how that changed the world in unprecedented ways. And
yeah,
just these
yeah.
different steps of the evolution of language, right? Changes the mind. Um, and yeah, I think it's a totally different mind. It's a mind of sound now. We were uh, not a
Mm,
mind of sound before. And now the crowd is just like the Iliad. And I think the point, maybe I'll end on this, but the difference is and it was mentioned by the author, there's no soul to unify it, right? Before, when there was a person singing the Iliad, that unified everybody in the moment. It was a real soul, real person. You
yeah.
could see them um, and be impressed by it. And I think, yeah, it is fascinating. We're moving back to that, but definitely a soulless version, perhaps.
Yeah, 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 it's super gnarly. Um, yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that more because the idea of a soul and spirit, I haven't really kind of thought and broken down for myself. So when I was reading that, maybe next time we can start off with that. We could just be talking about like, what does that mean? Because you have your whole relationship to God, and I'm sure that you would be able to talk about that and, with like in detail.
Certainly, yeah. Um, and I would say, in contrast, like what could be the leader of the mass, right? It could be
Mm,
now. It could be a deep fake. It could be literally a soulless individual.
yeah,
Something
yeah.
that's not even real. It could be uh, CGI.
Dude,
But
I think there's beyond comprehension what is in behind the curtain. I think whatever idea that the conspiracy, post truth, whatever, are thinking about, I think that it goes even further, and it's like forever that way. There's like layers and an infinite amount of like how wild and gnarly this whole reality can be. Um,
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
right on, right on.
But it's a beautiful
Um,
world, and
yes,
good to get
yes.
off the digital off ramp, right?
Have you been doing your push-ups or anything?
No, no, dude. I'll be honest about that. But
What?
I've been
What?
doing. I did them like one day, and then I did other things. I call them equations. They're equal
Okay,
tos,
what's that?
like yard work, raking, bagging
All right, all
leaves.
right.
So like moving rocks. I'm doing some landscaping, pretty heavy
Mm-hmm.
rocks. And so like if I do stuff like that, I'm like that's my labor for.
All
And
right,
then
all
I
right.
then I but to be honest, no, I'll pick it back up. I'm thinking about it. I'm just damn lazy to right now. I don't know why, man. I don't.
No,
I
I
think
get you.
about it, but yeah, why not? One thing is right. So like anytime I do something, and it could be I could use this for a purpose of a good, but immediately like as I'm with my children, immediately gathers attention. So it's not like it's not a push up. It's a push up with like a child on me, and then all of a sudden it's like
Yeah.
then it's playing, and so but and I like, oh, I could reinforce her to try to do the push-ups and do them with me, but yeah, sometimes it's just like, what are you doing? Why are
Yeah,
your
yeah,
hands on
you're
the
like,
floor? Are you gonna watch
yeah.
like it's just fun, but I'll get
Here's
back
a
into
little.
it. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Oh, I know you will, Provo. I believe in you, man. Like I wouldn't be talking
Thank
to
you.
you right now if I didn't believe in your ability to do it. Yeah, for sure. Um, what I was gonna say is, maybe you can even just start off doing downward dog, and
Yeah.
that is awesome for little kids to kind of see their parents doing, and they can mimic that, and it's not anything that's like they experience it with you in real time. So maybe that's a little like, hey, this is dad doing this right now. He's not like just kooky.
Yeah, and I'll take that. That'll be my first step, and then
Right
I'll
on, right
move
on.
into Cobra pose. Right. I
It's
wish I
very
knew the.
appropriate with your whole King Cobra thing.
Yeah, I love King Cobra, but I just want to say, thank you again, JFK Beta, for having me on. I really appreciate. I love these conversations. Um, they're to me the most fun, right? Especially when we share a topic of interest, and it's to me even like more enjoyable when we have some of these side conversations. I apologize if I rambled too long at some junctures, but either way, I really do appreciate the conversation. And everybody, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share JFK Beta. Um, and if you ever want to do a podcast with me, JFK Beta, doors open. Let's set something up
All right,
going
let's do it,
forward,
man.
and I'll
Yeah,
put
let's
it
do it.
on Spotify, iTunes. But we'll put it out there to the world. Do you have a pod? Are you gonna maybe put this on a podcast, JFK Beta?
Yeah, that's the goal. I'm just building up enough of the content to then kind of just push it out, and I kind of feel like I'm just trying to. Yes, yes, I do intend on doing that, and so that would be sweet to set something up with you that's like however consistent or wherever you want. That would be pretty cool, man. I'd appreciate that. It's great to get the ideas out.
Yeah, we could just do kind of like what you do, an hour, and then just maybe we could just introduce your show, JFK Beta, and review some of the things we've talked about, some of the ideas we share, and maybe encourage people to get on the digital off ramp.
That'd be perfect.
Okay. Well, God bless you. God bless your family, and I'll see you soon.
All right, God bless. Bye.
Take it easy.
All right, cool. And then I was like, "Oh, that'd be perfect." No, but I really appreciate Provo taking the time to chat and kind of help me work through some of these ideas that Byung-Chul Han was saying in chapter 2 of the In the Swarm digital prospects. And I think to close out, I might do just like maybe one more idea because this is just my kind of thoughts afterwards. Organized labor is not a matter of fleeting patterns. It consists of enduring formations. So I'm thinking about like labor unions back in the day, and I'm sure they still exist, but I'm not sure if they're the same physical things that they used to be, or like the sway that they could um, put an influence on policymakers and politicians and stuff. This was nice. This is just like a little brain, like, oh, these words that he uses: enduring formations, dominant power relations question. The mass is power, right? So, and instead of the swarm, well, before the swarm, there's the mass, like Laban says, and the mass has power. They can actually engage and question the dominant power relations. And that the swarm is there's a fleeting nature to it, because there's no space for it to coalesce. Outrage rises really quick and then it dissipates. And he talks a little bit more in that chapter about that. Only when a crowd is resolute about shared action does power arise. The mass is power. In contrast, digital swarms lack such resolve. They do not march. Because of their fleeting nature, no political energy wells up. By the same token, online shitstorms prove unable to call dominant power relations into question. Instead, they strike individual persons whom they unmask or make an item of scandal. I like that at the end, where it's like, okay, so maybe there's someone or a small group of people that are trying to question the dominant power relations, and the swarm sees that occurring, and they're like, oh, well, sure, you're small enough that we're just going to either create scandal around whatever you're saying, whoever you are, or we're going to identify who you are and dox you so that you no longer are able to kind of uh, strike up any kind of alternative idea or question what is occurring right now. Then I had something else. The shitstorm will strike. Yes, the shitstorm will strike individuals and pick them off before they can coalesce into a crowd, if there ever was one online. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm saying. This is what I thought, where they maybe even now they don't have to strike the swarm doesn't have to strike an individual. All they'll do is shuffle. I say people will also be shuffled into solitary echo chambers that appear to have engagement and interaction with all the symbols of relation of real interaction. The power of artificial engagement makes it so that people who might try and call dominant power, um, I said locations, but into question, relations into question, will be stuck in a false environment. And that's again the whole Twitter files, where they're like, oh yeah, all the people that you thought were listening to you and talking to you, about 50% or like 20,000 were just bots. And so you're like screaming into the void, but at the time you don't think it's a void. You think this is real. All these people are kind of commenting and bouncing ideas off me, but in reality, it's a void. Which is really terrifying. And it's like, when you think about, like, you're pouring all of your genuine energy into something and you think it's real, and then you find out like it was never real. And that's hard. That's really hard to think about. It said, how much of our current experience is genuine? How much is actually artificial? All right, my back's getting smoked. What does that mean for understanding true consensus in today's world? Are there more people that actually see things the way we do, but we are being shown a false image through this online lens? Oh, someone sneaking by, get some foodies. Huh. This is the beginning of what is real in this whole performance. Is this a performance? No, it's me just talking about. So, are there more people? Yeah. Are there more people this is the next thing I thought. Are there more people that actually see things the way we do, but we are being shown a false image through this online lens? So, maybe you think, actually, no one sees things the way that I'm seeing them. I get no interaction or no feedback that this is like, oh yeah, you're onto something. And so they kind of just make you think, oh no, but really there's lots of people that feel the same way, see the world the way that you're seeing it, and it's just not being bounced back to you. um, Today and this is me chopping up the last part of the chapter into like reverse quotes, because that's how my brain worked for this one. um, today Today exploitation is possible without any domination at all. It is the capitalist system itself which encompasses everything. The contemporary achievement subject is perpetrator and victim in one, which is gnarly. Like, you'll be in charge of yourself, and you'll put yourself into your own chains. And then he quotes these two people, Negri and Hart, do not recognize this logic of self-exploitation, which is much more efficient than allo exploitation. And I had to look up allo exploitation, and it's exploitation from outside the self, as opposed to self-exploitation. I'm choosing to exploit myself. Allo exploitation, there's an outside power that's going to exploit my power, my resources. Um, no one rules the empire. It is meaningful to speak of class only when a plurality of classes exists. They quote, multitude, however, signifies the sole class. All who participate in the capitalist system belong to it. In fact, empire does not refer to a ruling class that exploits the multitude. Everyone now thinks him or herself free, even while working to death. Uh, So socius as yield to solus, and socius is comrade, friend, or ally, used to describe a bond or interaction between parties that are friendly or at least civil. It has given rise to the word society. And then solus is alone or unaccompanied. So yeah, we're being put into solitude. I like this word. Atomization of society is making the space for collective action to shrink. He says the mounting egoization and atomization of society is making the space for collective action to shrink. And for me, atomization, the act or process of splitting into smaller parts, sections, groups, fragmentation, or disintegration. Egoize, to give excessive attention or consideration to oneself or to what relates to oneself, be absorbed in self. Um, and I talk about we're being atomized. Yeah, this is actually kind of nice. Our society is being our society is becoming further atomized. Anything that could be taken into a singular position is being presented to the people. The individual is then asked to make a stand or to take a position on any and all subjects. Everything and anything is now a wedge issue. We are being wedged apart, being broken and fragmented as a people. The body is something that unifies us. All bodies move through space and experience this life. There's something unifying about this experience of being in the body. So I look to the body as a pillar of staying connected as a people. It's funny that we are experiencing solitude even with all of this technology that's supposed to be social media. It's also interesting that personal distance is being eroded, yet there is a push for social distancing during the past global health crisis. Mental distance is being erased, so in a way we have solitude, but we are being pushed into this swarm, which is a mass of sorts, alone but together. Where are community centers? Where are formal communal spaces of gathering? We no longer have the third space. Prova and I talked about that. And then privatization now reaches into the depths of the soul itself. And I was asking, what does that mean to you? And I said, to have any type of meaningful experience, we are now being pushed into using middlemen or third party as a broker for connecting with another human being. What could once be found at the community center or public library is now being outsourced to private companies. But on top of it, people would rather remain at home and use their devices, slowly becoming the device, to then be only a device for the person who owns the technology. And I'll give myself a pat on the shoulder. I came up with that kind of frame of thought, that we're becoming the devices for someone else to use us. And then I say, join me on the journey, this digital off ramp. And thank you for taking the time to listen, whoever's listening, or maybe I'm just doing this for my own kind of therapy or figuring stuff out. But that was great. Shout out to Provo Kid. Follow him on YouTube. He has YouTube and he has his what do you call it, podcast, and I think he's on a bunch of different of those RSS podcasting platforms like Spotify and stuff. So he has a lot of really interesting ideas, and his work is, for the most part, he has some interviews, but most of his work is just him talking for an hour out loud, and he's kind of just riffing. He has some, I think he does preparation, but it's just him talking for an hour, which is really different, and you don't really see that so much anymore. So give him a follow, and I think that's it. So I encourage you to take some time out of your day and move your body a little bit. I'm still doing the 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups. I'm on day, I think 56 or 57. I've been posting it on my Instagram, JFK Beta, and I encourage you to start your digital off-ramp journey with that and reach out to me if you have any questions. Also, it'd be cool if whoever might be seeing this, if they want to do the book club as well. So reach out, leave a comment, and then I'll be able to send you a copy of the book. All right. Beta today, better tomorrow. And this thing, it don't want to let me close and record.